Hey guys, this is Srikanth, Java Full Stack Trainer in WinCube Software Solutions. So today we are going to continue in the third video. So our today's question is why default methods introduced in interfaces from Java 8. So the answer behind that you can go and explain to the interviewers. So before 1.8 onwards, before 1.8 or before N.8 in interfaces, we have only final variables, final variables, and abstract methods, we can say. That is the first reason you can say why uh, we should know that what happens before 1.8. But from 1.8 onwards, from, from 1.8 onwards, introduced static and default methods. So in today's concept, we will be going to cover. Here we are discussing default methods, why they introduced. So discussing default methods, we can say. Here we are discussing default methods. Why we are discussing why default methods introduced. Okay. So let's talk about clearly here. So default methods introduced. Default methods were introduced in Java 8. Make interfaces more flexible and powerful, you can say. Okay. So default methods were introduced in Java 8 to make interface more flexible and powerful, you can say. Okay. So this is where you guys can understand why default methods introduced means yes, the answer is more, your interfaces should be more powerful and flexible. Now, there are some reasons behind that. So here we are going to understand now two reasons. Like the first reason we'll be going to say allowing backward compatibility. Allowing backward compatibility. What is meant by backward compatibility? If you added a new method to the interface, all implementing classes must need to implement that new method without fail. The new method without fail. Otherwise, otherwise the code would break and we will get compile time errors. Let's say if we have an interface IN1, in interface IN1, there are abstract methods, void method 1. This is an abstract method. Let's keep it like public abstract. By default, all methods from interfaces, abstract methods only. So here we have two methods. One is method 1 and another one is method 2. This is an interface. Whereas class test A, I'm going to create class test A implements IN1. That means test A is promising to IN1, I'm here to implement all your methods. Then we must need to implement the methods from interface with public. Here, whenever you have an implementation means, yes, you need to write the code in such a way. There is a class A implements IN1. There is a class B implements IN1 means, yes, this class B also implement method 1 and method 2. Then what is backward compatibility? In future, if the client is looking for a new functionality, then what we can do, if we added a new method to the interfaces here, I'm going to keep there is a method 3. All implementing classes must need to implement that new method. Otherwise, the code would break. So now my test A should implement method 3 and test B should implement method 3. Whether there is a need or not, these method 3 and method 4 must need to implement inside the test A and test B. Now, if I want to go and add method 4 in future again you must need to go and implement test A and test B. See, that will be the problem, and because of that, we can say if you have a default methods in interfaces, you no need to worry about the implementing classes. We can provide the common behavior with the default methods. So let's say if I'm going to write a method 4, method 4 is a default method which will be having the implementation inside the interfaces. Now, if you want to use this default method for a test A, yes, we can use. For a test B, if you want to use, you can use. And one more point, you can say default method, we can override default methods. We can override default methods. We can override based on our requirements. Based on our requirements, you can say this is what one of the very important reason why default methods introduced in Java 8. That is backward compatibility. And the second reason I can say, it supports functional programming. So it supports, so default method supports default methods supporting default methods supporting functional programming. Functional programming. That means, yes, Java 8 introduced lambda expressions and functional interfaces. So Java 8 introduced lambda expressions and functional interfaces. So in those functional interfaces and for working with lambda expressions, the default methods also we are going to use inside these interfaces and with lambda expressions. So there again, as I mentioned earlier, yes, it will be going to provide more flexible and powerful interfaces to work with your implementations. So one of the questions from the interview was like, default methods, can we override to the classes? Yes, default methods we can override based on our requirements. So the point, so to avoid, this point you can consider like third point, to avoid common classes in Java like collections class, we can use default methods in interfaces would be the better option, we can say. So this is why we need default methods in interfaces. So our next video will be going to come with a static methods and default method example program. Default method example program, I can say. Okay. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share it to your friends. Thank you.